Hi everyone, my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveed from Before You Play.
And welcome to the final video in our top 50 board games of all time, which is also known as our top 10 games of all time.
That is
as
true.
It currently stands.
Yes.
And also, Happy New Year to everybody out there, because we are now in 2022. So hope you're having a wonderful holiday season so far.
So we've done 4 other videos like this leading up to this one. So this is the big final wrap up, I guess, if you want to call it that.
The home stretch?
The home stretch. We do share a collection, so there may be a lot of crossovers here. So we'll talk about those when we get there.
And as per usual, we are going to have one final giveaway that is paired with this video. Thank you so much to all of the publishers who we've partnered with in the other 4 videos thus far. And as usual, stay tuned until the very end of the video to hear what this giveaway is. And without further ado, here are our top 10 board games of all time, starting with number 10. Naveen, would you like to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Makes
All
sense. So number 10 for me. This is a game that I've talked about on the channel before, but we have not actually played it on the channel. It's designed by 3 different designers back in 2014. Gil de Ore, Nuno Bizarro Centero, and Paulo Soledad, and it's published by Stronghold Games. It's a game called Panamax.
Ah, nice.
Yes, Panamax. Okay, so this game, essentially what you're doing is you are trying to fulfill different contracts of cargo by moving literally cargo on these card ships or these token ships across the Panama Canal from one side from the east all the way to the west. It gets very interesting because in the canal you can get passive movement from your opponents because there's kind of a blockade or a bottleneck in the canal. So you can kind of camp in the canal and then have other people passively move you through so you're not wasting actions just trying to get your cargo across. It's a fantastic game. There's an economic aspect of it because there is also a stock market where you are investing in not only your own company, but you can also invest in other players' companies if you see that they're doing something really, really well. And ultimately, it's the person who's run the best business wins the game.
Yeah, so I was going to say, it's truly an economic game, right?
It is,
it's going to be whoever has most money.
Most money, yep.
So this has a very interesting dice selection, action selection kind of component to it, where all the dice are just laid out in the middle of the board, and depending on which dice you select is what action you get to take and how strongly you get to do so, I suppose.
That's exactly it.
And this is a game that was also on a previous list. It's one of the games that I believe that you're never getting rid of.
That's right, yeah, that's exactly it. So that was in a previous video. I mentioned this is one of my 10 games that I would not want to get rid of. I think it's out of print, so I do apologize.
Oh, is that right?
I think so, if you're trying to look for it, but I think there's a secondhand market. And if you do see it and you like those kind of games, I would highly recommend Panamax. So that is my number 10. That is Panamax.
Nice. Great choice. All right, moving on to my number 10. This is a spoiler. So anybody who is going to be following along the continuation of our Uwe Rosenberg series, this is an Uwe Rosenberg game. If you'd prefer not to be spoiled on what our final lineup is going to be, then feel free to skip ahead right now. But yes, my number 10 is designed by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Lookout Games in 2013. This is a game that I've mentioned previously, but I don't think I've ever spoken about before.
Maybe not, yeah.
And it is called Caverna, the Cave Farmers. Oh my gosh, this is large as well.
This is big.
You gotta kind of hold it together or else all the animals
I'll hold it,
are gonna
we can talk about it.
fall out. So this is a game, if you've never played Caverna before, this is kind of like the follow-up to Agricola. This is the other farming game.
It's the one that people will ask the question, which one do you prefer, Agricola or Caverna?
And clearly, as it stands right now, I prefer Caverna, and so that's why this is a spoiler, but this is kind of the more sandboxy version of Agricola. You can do a lot more. It encourages you to find more combos. It's just a larger kind of scale game and not as restrictive. It definitely scratches that kind of a Euro itch for me. It introduces the adventuring. You know, you can go with your people and adventure, and then like you'll have like a menu of items to choose from. It's just a lot more feel good in that sense, but also still has the restriction in some ways that Agricola initially kind of implemented.
Yeah, Agricola is pretty punishing, or you have to worry about getting punished. This one is, like you said, more sandbox, more rewarding. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've only played this one I think twice, so I don't have too much experience with it, but I'm looking forward to our plays of it leading up to our Uwe Rosenberg series.
I will say one of the first times I've ever played Caverna was with the expansion, the Forgotten Folk expansion, and Honestly, I'm a fan of asymmetry, and so I feel like I would probably never play it without that,
Okay.
as long as everybody around the table agrees.
Yeah.
Because the Forgotten Folk expansion is really interesting. It gives everybody kind of an asymmetric player faction, I
yeah.
suppose, and each faction has a benefit as well as a hindrance. And I thought that that was really interesting, and
That is
it's very thematic to what your faction or kind of character is.
Yeah, the two plays I've had of it, we did not play with the Forgotten Folk expansion, so I am very unfamiliar with it, but I am intrigued by it because, of course, we do like asymmetry. It kind of like leads you kind
Yeah.
of in a direction, which
In
is
a
always
direction,
nice.
right? And so anyway, that is my number 10. This is Caverna, the Cave Farmers.
Okay, my number 9. This is our first crossover for this list, so we're gonna do something a little bit different. The next time it shows up on Monique's list or vice versa, then we'll talk about it then.
Makes sense.
Make sense?
So that way it's a little bit closer to number 1.
Exactly,
Right?
yep.
A little bit easier. Okay. So,
All right, so
keeping
then
it
I'm
vague,
punting it off to you.
mysterious.
Number 9.
All right, thank you. Well then, my number 9 is a crossover from a previous video, so I will talk about it now. And this is a game that was designed by Rob Daviau and Matt Leacock and published by Z-Man Games in 2015. It is none other than Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Specifically Season 1.
Well, yes,
Yes,
true.
because this is the only one, if you know us, we've only
If
played
you
to
know us.
completion. Yeah. Season 2, we're still stuck in somewhere in August, and
Right.
it remains that way.
We are legacy
Again.
game slackers.
Yes.
So anyway, if you did not catch the previous videos, or if you're not even familiar with this game, this is a legacy style game based off of the Pandemic base series,
System.
which is
Yeah.
a game where you are saving the world from these 4 diseases. You're trying to cure them. It's fully cooperative. It's a good time. Very popular base game that they turned into a legacy style game that changes over the course of 12 months in the game.
Each game scenario is 1 month,
Mm-hmm.
and so what's cool about this one is if you fail it, then you get a little bit of help to redo the same month again. And if you
Right.
fail it again, then you just kind of move on to the next month.
And all of the Pandemic Legacy seasons 1, 2, and 0, all kind of follow that same format, I think.
We think about
We
0.
think
We have
about
not
0.
seen that one yet.
Unknown. But either way, you're doing things like ripping up cards, you're opening envelopes. It's very exciting because you do a thing and then you get to discover something and it's going to change the way you play the game. And even if you're really, really used to the Pandemic base game, it's really, really refreshing to play something like this.
The game plays out kind of like a TV show, like,
Yeah.
like you're playing through a season of
Exactly.
a TV show. Like I used to watch the show 24, and it really feels like that kind of like you're going from one episode to the next episode,
Yeah.
and like what's going to happen next.
Especially if you get really into it.
Yeah.
But this is definitely in my top 10. I would say more just the entire idea of it. This is my favorite legacy style game so far. And I'm always on the lookout for more and more legacy games I can kind of add to my legacy game entourage, I guess. If you have a favorite legacy game that's not Pandemic Legacy, please let me know because
Yes.
I really, really enjoy that kind of discovery aspect to it. But yeah, this is my number 9 favorite game of all time. This is Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Okay, my number 8 is an exact crossover with Monique. I think this is our last exact crossover where my 8 is her 8. So
I think so.
We can talk about this together. This one came out back in 2017, designed by 2 different designers, Jens Drogenmuller and Helge Ostertag, and it's now published by Capstone Games. Our copy is from Z-Man Games, and it is Gaia Project
Woohoo!
a Terra Mystica game.
Oh my gosh.
So this
That's a good
one
game.
is, if you're familiar with either this or Terra Mystica, they kind of follow very similar design styles. And essentially, what you're doing is it's kind of a not a space opera, but essentially what you're trying to do is it's a tech tree game where you're trying to expand your exact alien race onto different planets in the surrounding galaxy, and you're trying to outwit your opponents.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is a 2.0 version of Terra Mystica, which is another game that they're both a sort of a heavier games.
Definitely.
I know when we were getting into the hobby, Terra Mystica was like one of the heaviest games.
We went to a convention
there.
and we heard a guy say like, I want to play Terra Mystica, but only with people who know how to play Terra Mystica. And at the time we were like, man, that's kind of rude, but I understand why. It is a long teach, and if you just want to get into a game and not go through 45 minutes of teach,
Yes.
it makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And so this is the 2.0 of that.
Yes.
Because if you're familiar with Terra Mystica, the base, there is kind of like a track that's just kind of going up the track. It's not really... It's
Caprice
not,
track or something.
It's not super functional. And so I think that they replaced that with this sort of tech tree of options that dictate how strongly you can perform certain actions.
Yes, yeah, because
right?
those tech trees, they basically correspond to the different types of actions, and so as you move up them, you can do those things better. And so everybody starts with the asymmetric faction. So we talked about asymmetry, which is cool because it kind of gives you a leg up on one track. So you're like, do I want to keep going that direction?
Right.
Should I go that direction, or maybe I should kind of diversify?
But I think the main purpose of this game is everybody has their own sort of mat with buildings on it, and you're trying to build these buildings onto the main board. And so in this game, the theme is space. So you're building out your buildings onto planets. You're trying to terraform them so that you're able to reach them
And create a federation.
Yeah, and create a federation, stuff like that. And it's a very similar concept in Terra Mystica. You're building out buildings as well. The main difference is that tech tree that we're mentioning. And so to me, it's interesting because it's almost like they replaced one aspect of Terra Mystica with that tech tree. And when you play Gaia Project, the tech tree is quite a large part of the game.
It
It almost kind of
yeah.
shifts the focus into who can make the tech tree work together with your strategy in putting out those buildings, right? Because it's still a Euro game at the end of the day. There are different things that will score during every round, and then there's obviously end game scoring, and it is excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
So good. We've covered this game on our channel before. Before this game came out, I really, really wanted to explore Terra Mystica
Yes.
and all of its expansions and all that until this one was released, and then now we're very much on board with Gaia Project.
Yeah, aesthetically, I like Terra Mystica better.
I agree.
And also the neighboring bonus, I think, is a little more interesting in Terra Mystica. But this one, for me, the tech tree and what's going on there supersedes Terra Mystica for me.
It just makes it way more strategic,
Yeah.
in our opinion. Although we do know that there are people who are on both sides of that argument. There's some people who really prefer Terra Mystica.
Sure.
And I can totally see that. It's a better theme,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I would say so.
Anyway, that is our exact crossover, the last one of this entire series. But yes, number 8, Gaia Project. All right, then back to you again for number 7.
Number 7. Okay, so this is one that Monique talked about in a previous video. This one I knew was probably going to be in my top 10 when we set out to do this.
For sure.
I didn't know where it was going to sit until we did the ranking engine. This one came out back in 2011, published by Alea and Ravensburger, and designed by Stefan Feld, and it is one of my favorite Euro games of all time, of course. It is the Castles of Burgundy.
Oh, yeah.
This was one that I did not get to try until like a little bit further into my gaming experience. I think it was like I was already 3 years maybe into the hobby.
Yeah.
And then I finally got a chance to play this. I think you had recommended like, oh, you still haven't played it?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
All the rage, Castles of Burgundy.
Yeah, it was all the rage, I guess. But essentially what you're doing in this game is the theme is kind of pasted on here, but you're trying to build out your territory, your
estate. With tiles.
With tiles
Yeah.
such as different castles. You're trying to put out different farms with different types of animals, or the same type of animal if you know Castles of Burgundy.
Yeah.
You're trying to do shipping and basically score the most amount of points. This is a true point salad game.
Yeah, this one's interesting because to me, it's almost like you're constantly trying to one-up your opponent, right? In the entire game. There's a shipping where whenever you ship, you get to move forward with your ship, and
it changes
it
turn
dictates
order.
turn order.
Yeah, which is
trying
big
to
in this game.
You're trying to complete areas earlier. The earlier the better, because it scores you more points. You're trying to complete certain colored areas before your opponents. So it is just a lot of one-upping each other in various ways, but it's really fun.
Yeah, this one plays well at all player counts too. I like it at 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
I think 3 might be the sweet spot for me, but I have no problem playing it at any player count.
This is the game that I absolutely knew was going to end up on his top 10 list or your top 10 list because of how much Naveen loves this game. And this is also one that this is going to be so hard to kick off your list.
Yeah,
in the next couple of years.
I think this will probably be there for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of things in the top 50 are pretty fluid. You know, even right now, between now and the time that we formulated the entire list, things probably have changed in order.
Yeah.
But this one is going to stay for a while.
I think
and this is also another reason why we both have kind of a hard time making these lists, because there's so many of these older titles that are so good and they really stand the test of time. And
yeah, this is one that I'm willing to pretty much always play. I've never gotten to a point where I'm sick of it. I could play it 4 times within a weekend and
be fine.
be totally fine with it. So that is my number 7 of all time. That is Stefan Feld's The Castles of Burgundy.
Nice. All right, moving on to my number 7. So my number 7 is Naveen's number 9.
It was my 9, so now we can talk about it.
Now we're going to talk about it. This is a game that was designed by R. Eric Roos and published by Greater Than Games in 2017. This is a new to us game in the past year. Yeah, this is like our 1-year anniversary.
We've covered it on the channel.
And it is called Spirit Island. My all-time favorite cooperative game of all time.
Okay.
Wow, said all time
Wow.
twice.
All time. Yes. So this is my number 9 of all time. This is your number 7.
My
So
number
it gets
7.
pretty close.
Yeah.
But they're both definitely, for us, it's a top 10 game.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a fantastic game. Really,
fantastic
really good.
game. This is a fully cooperative game if you've never played it before, where you are playing as spirits and you're trying to help the natives of an island protect the island from invaders, essentially. And the thing about it is you're not playing as the natives, you're playing as spirits. And so because of that, we kind of embody different elements or different parts of nature.
Yep.
And that's the asymmetry to this game. You have a deck of cards and they're all thematically intertwined with what your spirit can do.
You have like a starting hand of cards, but over the course
Right.
of the game, you can kind of acquire other cards that are just from a grab bag. So you can kind of custom and tailor like what kind of spirit you're going to become over the
Right.
course of the game.
You can be the fire spirit, you can be the ocean spirit, and all of those kind of dictate your playing style and what you're able to do in the round. And the game is also extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
It's one of those where you might lose a lot the first time you play, but there's also various modes of play that you can put into your game once you start getting better at it and you want to do more and more challenges. And so we have not yet played everything that comes in the base game,
No,
but it's
not yet.
something that we're looking forward to exploring for the upcoming year and maybe even diving into some of the expansions.
Yeah, that's definitely
right?
something that we've heard and seen in some of the comments from our last couple of videos of Spirit Island. Like, oh, you got to try out these different expansions because I'm totally willing to, because what's in this base game so far from what we've played, I absolutely love. And if everybody's like, oh, if you love that, you're really going to love this other stuff. I think it's a no-brainer at this point.
Mind blown.
Yeah, so this is a fantastic game. I think this is going to stay for a very, very long time.
I think so. Oh yeah, it's gonna be hard to top a game like this.
Yep.
So that is my number 7 and
My number 9.
Spirit Island.
Okay, moving on. My number 6. This is a game that is going to show up later on in Monique's list, so we will reserve the right to talk about it at that point.
All right, passing it back to me.
Yep.
Okay, so then my number 6 is a crossover from a previous video that Naveen had chosen. And it's a game that was designed by Richard Amann and Victor Peter, published by Mind Clash Games in 2015. This is another game that we need to give a disclaimer for. We've been sponsored to do a playthrough of it on our channel, and we still have another one yet to
more
do.
to go.
And it's called Tricarion. Legends of Illusion.
Yes.
So,
a little too far.
Again, this is the box that we showed in the previous video where Naveen had chosen it. So this is a collector's edition. It does come in a different box if you just get the base game. But this game has been on my list for since the first time I played it.
This was known. We knew this was going to be on your channel.
Oh yeah, 100%. Just like I knew Castle Burgundy was going to be on Naveen's list, Naveen probably knew that this was going to be on mine,
Totally.
in addition to the Lacerdas and all that, because I really, really, really love this game from the moment that I was introduced to it. In fact, first of all, if you're not familiar with it, this is a game where you're playing as competing magicians, you're performers, and you're just trying to be the best magician in all of Magoria.
Yeah.
But it is quite heavy. It's a very long, very involved, mentally involved game where you are trying to learn tricks. You're gathering trick components from the store.
You're hiring assistants.
All so that you can perform these tricks in the theater. And it's played over like 7 rounds, but it's really intense. And my favorite part of the game is the action selection mechanism. You know, everybody has a hand of cards that are identical to start the game. And all of the cards that you have correspond to the different locations on the board. And so at the start of each round, you're going to simultaneously select secretly which
all the
locations,
actions that you want
every
to
single
take.
location you're going to, and you're going to put them in front of all of the assistants and just employees who you've hired over the course of the game, because they're going to be your worker placement people. And then once everybody's ready, you simultaneously reveal all of your cards so that you know exactly where everybody is going, because there are only a certain number of worker placement spots per location, and not all the spots are treated equally, because some of them give you more action points.
Yeah, the first
than
spot is
others.
Sweeter, which has like an inherent base, like a
3 or
value of
something.
3. The
Yeah.
next spot is like an inherent base value of 1. And some of your workers also come with a boosted kind of action point. So
Right.
you start looking around the table and you're like, oh man, you're going to the dark alley? I really want to go to the dark alley.
Because on your turn, you only get to go to one location. You're going to put out your workers one at a time. And so this dictates the order that you put your workers out in. Anyway, that's my favorite part of the game, because that is the most like meta. That's the most, I've got to get into
a lot of
my
player
opponent's
interaction at that
heads,
point.
right?
Yeah.
Like I really need that component right now, or I need to get that trick before this person does. So I'm going to make sure that I go there first.
Right.
It's very, very interesting. It's such a fantastic game. But again, this is a game that we were sponsored to do a playthrough of in the past, and you will be seeing another playthrough of it in the future, coming up hopefully this upcoming month.
Yep.
And so this is my number 6, Trickerion Legends of Illusion.
Okay, so we are at the halfway mark. This is my number 5 game of all time. This is a crossover from my previous video. Monique talked about this one. This is technically the second edition of this game. It came out in 2018, designed by Vital Lacerda and published by Stronghold Games. And it is none other than CO2 Second Chance.
Second Chance.
So I've never played the first one.
Not the first chance.
I don't know anything about the first chance, but I've definitely played this one several times. There are 2 different modes of play in this game. There is a semi-cooperative competitive game and the fully cooperative experience. So for me, it's number 5 because of that fully cooperative experience.
Yeah.
Essentially what's happening in this game is pollution is rising, CO2 levels are rising, and so the world is in crisis, and we are different industrialists or different scientists that are trying to combat it by bringing the CO2 levels down. And so in the cooperative experience, you are trying to share knowledge with your teammates, but there is a hidden agenda that everybody has, and everybody must achieve that hidden agenda, meaning you're not allowed to talk about it ahead of time in the game. And so sometimes people are going to want to do things and you're like, let's actually do this thing first if you don't mind.
It's really hard.
But you really don't want to, if you want to be fair to the game and fair to yourself, you don't want to really emphasize what exactly it is that you're gunning for. But it's a fantastic game. It's very, very Vital Lacerda-like, where you're getting executive actions and you get to do a bunch of cool stuff, just trying to go up different tracks so you can gain knowledge and essentially combat this problem.
It's hard.
It's hard.
This game is probably harder than Spirit Island. And it's interesting. This is probably your favorite cooperative game of all time.
Yeah, it's not a pure cooperative
higher
game, but yes, the cooperative experience, absolutely.
Yes, the fully cooperative part of it is higher on your list than Spirit Island.
That's right.
So I really enjoy this game as well as a cooperative game. It is very, very strategic, very hard, but also less strategic at the same time. I feel like you could lose the game just because the game was out to get you.
Yeah,
from
because
the get-go.
Sometimes there's pollution tiles that come out and from anywhere from I think 20 up to 40 parts per million. And so if you just start pulling those big ones, it just becomes that much harder.
Yeah, but I know that Naveen really loves this game because whenever we play it cooperative, he gets really into it.
I am.
It gets really intense.
Yes.
But I guess that's just your passion for saving the planet, right?
It's true. I'm a humanitarian.
There you go.
What can I say?
Yeah.
And that is my number 5 of all time, CO2 Second Chance.
All right, moving on to my number 5. So this is the home stretch. This is 50 games of all time, and we're down to our top 5.
5.
Which, by the way, for me at least, I don't know if you feel the same way. For me, my top 5 is constantly in flux.
Yeah.
So this is where it stands right now. If I were to be completely honest, my top 5 is more like all the games tied for number 1. Because I love all 5 of these games so much. If you've been following along on our channel, you know that I'm a big Vital Lacerda fan. So here they all come. My number 5 is designed by Vital Lacerda, published by Eagle Gryphon Games in 2020. It was really hard to figure out where to put this one, but it is on Mars. So this is my number 5 game of all time. It is also one that I said is tied for truly number 1 because I love this game.
It is fantastic.
So much so. But the reason why it is number 5, and if you're not familiar with it, this is a crossover. Naveen had mentioned this way earlier in his list.
Way earlier.
It was a few videos ago.
A couple videos.
But you're basically set in space. You're on Mars. We're trying to colonize Mars, make it habitable for human life, I suppose. And you are going back and forth between the space station and the surface of Mars to bring resources, to bring all these things that you need in order to build out a colony on Mars. And it sounds really, nice and dandy, but it is extremely difficult. And that is why it is my number 5, because there's such a barrier to playing it, to introducing it to other people. I would say that out of all of Vital Lacerda's games, this is probably the one that has the largest barrier. This one or Lisboa for some reason. But for
largest
me,
overhead.
In my head, the rules overhead is quite large on Mars. We played it very recently. We did it for the expansion that was on Kickstarter for the cooperative experience, and I quite enjoyed that version of it. But I think it's probably in my top 10 for the competitive experience.
Yes.
Not that I don't like working together.
What has been officially published so far?
Yes. It's just that a lot of the components in the game are specifically created for the competitive experience.
That's right. Yeah, my favorite part of this game, which I think I mentioned in the previous video, was over time, as you're building up on Mars, your dependency on going back to that space station is a lot less. But
It's
sometimes
huge, yeah.
you can get stuck up there, and you're taking inopportune turns there. So you really have to time when are you going to go back and forth at the right time. And this takes a lot of forward planning in this game.
Oh, yeah.
And your favorite part is the life cycle of everything.
I go back
Right.
and forth about what is my favorite part specifically. I just really like how all of the elements connect,
Yeah.
and that is why I like Vitalis Starter games in the first place, because his design style is very much so where he designs all of these components that you need in order to form one larger thing, I suppose. And that is really involved in this game with
Yeah.
the life cycle of resources, which means you really need to pay attention to which resources specifically you're getting in order to do what you want to do.
Yeah, what buildings you're building out.
Yeah, you have to really pay strong attention when you play this game. And so that is my number 5 game of all time. This is On Mars.
Okay, my number 4. This is another crossover that will appear later on in this list.
Oh my gosh.
And so we will talk about it when it shows up.
We didn't even do the last one yet.
Not yet.
We're in debt.
This
We're
is
in board game debt.
Yeah, I'm in debt.
My number 4 is another crossover from something that Naveen has chosen in a previous video. And this is another Vitalis Starter game. So this is, again, going in line with, I don't quite know how to order these top 5. But for now, this is my number 4. It was published by Eagle Gryphon Games. This version of it was published a lot more recently, but I think the version that we played initially was published in 2014. And it is a game called Kanban, or aka Kanban EV, in the newest iteration of it, which I think, did this come out last year? This is very recent.
This is very recent.
If not last year, the year before.
I'm pretty sure
But
it's last year.
this is the souped up version of Kanban standard. I think it was called Kanban, the Automotive Revolution.
Back then.
Yes.
Then there was like Driver's Edition.
Yes, then there was Driver's Edition, and then Kanban EV. And so we get a lot of questions about Kanban, about where it stays in our ranking because of the new edition, the Kanban EV. If you're not familiar with the game and didn't catch our previous video where Naveen talked about it, this is a game where you are working in an automotive factory. You're trying to gain parts. You're doing
Getting blueprints
you're
for
getting
cars.
blueprints, you're getting the parts, you're doing testing on cars, you're having meetings where you're going to be pitching your pet project to score a bunch of points. And it's another one of those Vitalis Starter games where everything intertwines. You need to have the blueprints in order to make the car, in order to do this, and
Test it out on the racetrack.
yes,
Yeah.
it is quite involved. This is the first Vitalis Starter game we'd ever played, the original. And now they came out with this new version that I believe, I don't know if it was Kickstarter only, but I know that our version has like a mini
Kickstarter
expansion
stuff,
to
yeah.
it. But other than that, it really just had some rules changes that you could easily implement into your original game. And everything else was very superficial aesthetic
Yeah.
design.
The layout of the board in the original, the 2014 or whatever that came out was a little bit disjointed, and it's a little bit hard on the eyes when you first walk by the table. If you see it laid out, you're kind of like, what is going on there?
Yeah.
This one they try to clean it up a little bit, but there is a lot going on in the game.
There's a lot going on the board, so there's only so much you can do aesthetically for that. I think that Ian O'Toole, as wonderful as Ian O'Toole is, did a great job doing that with this version of it.
Yeah.
But it was still a culture shock, kind of going from the original version to this.
Yeah, because everything
Like,
got kind of skewed.
wow. Yeah.
So I'm so used to playing our old version of it or our older version of it
Yeah.
that I'm so used to I need to go to oh wait, that's not where it is. That's where
Yeah,
it is.
our brain was so used to looking at the other map that
Yeah.
that was no longer busy.
Yes.
And then moving to this one, everything became busy again.
Yeah, that's right, because my brain has to undo some things. But
Yeah.
fantastic game. What is your favorite part of this game? Is it Sandra?
Oh my gosh. I really, really like how turn order works in terms of which department you want to go to.
Yeah.
The way that it works is you're going to go to a department and you're going to take all of your actions contained in that one department
Yes.
each round. And every round you have to move to a different department, but the turn order is dependent on the...
From left to right.
From left to
Or
right,
top to
yeah.
bottom.
Top to bottom in this version.
Yeah.
That also determines who gets to choose where to go next.
Yep.
And so that becomes like a meta game of like, oh, I know Naveen needs to go to this
It's like
this
Naveen
area.
is in the blueprint area,
Yeah.
so he's blocking the really good spot there. Do I
Right.
want to go there now and take a less efficient spot because
Mm-hmm.
he's in the spot that's a little bit better?
Right, and you can see when the next meeting is going to come up or when the next end of week scoring is going to happen.
Yep.
And so you can kind of guess where certain players are going to need to go next. And so I know this is really mean, but you can kind of block them out of those
can,
spots.
yep.
I think that part part is really interesting. That's probably my favorite part. And this is actually the game that fluctuates as being my favorite game of all time. So it does feel kind of weird talking about it at number 4. But like I said, all of these top 5 are such a tie. And to answer your question, to any of you who are wondering about where this specific game falls in line, now that it's the EV version, in my head, they're the same game.
Yep.
So I till this day, I will still talk about Kanban, the Automotive Revolution, as well as this version of it as being
As
the
a
same game.
yeah,
If the original
experience.
game goes up in my list, so will this. And so right now, it is my number 4 game of all time. That is Kanban, Automotive Revolution / Kanban EV.
Okay, my number 3, I've done it again. It's another crossover with Monique. We wanted to be as honest as possible with these lists.
We want
and-
to be efficient too.
Yeah, and,
And
we,
none
we
of
live in
these-
the same household. We have the same games, so they're gonna fluctuate. But we both really enjoy these games, and it's kind of similar to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
With like the top 5 is like a Rolodex, where it's just
It's a
like it
Rolodex.
could be here, it could be
Depends on
there.
the day.
When we ran these lists and we really looked at it, though, my number 3 is somewhere else on Monique's list.
Yes.
So we'll talk about it then.
So what we'll do is you can talk about my number 3, because now this is going to call back to what we had skipped on you.
Sure. Yes.
My number 3 is your number.
6.
All right.
Yes.
This is a game that is designed by Uwe Rosenberg. So
Yes.
another spoiler alert. This one is so high on our list. But if you really don't want this to be spoiled, then feel free to skip ahead to our number 2. But for now, this is a game designed by Uwe Rosenberg, published by Z-Man Games in 2016.
And it is none other than the big box, Feast for Odin.
So good.
This is a Viking themed game where you can kind of do a little bit of everything. There is a huge, enormous menu of actions that you can take, such as going spearfishing.
Like now that you're thinking about it,
Well, like you can
go
go
to the market,
spearfishing, you can
get goods,
go to a market,
go
you
hunting.
can go hunting,
Yeah.
you can raid and pillage, you can make jewelry. So there's a ton of different things that you can do in this game. It is ultimately it's a worker placement, but kind of an action selection game, just based off of kind of the different sections of the menu board that you can take actions, because
Yeah, I think
they're
it's-
kind of grouped into different types of actions that
They
you can
are.
take.
I think it's truly a worker placement.
It's truly a
game,
worker placement
because
game.
that is how you're selecting your actions. You're putting
Yeah.
your worker out, and then you have the ability to block other people, because this menu that Naveen is referring to can only house one
Yeah.
person per spot. But that is probably the part of the game that turns off people the most, and that is that huge selection of spots that you can go to, because you play other worker placement games that have like 8 spots.
Yeah.
And this has, I don't even know what the number is. on
I
this.
think like somewhere like around 40 plus.
Yeah. And when we get to this game in our series, which is going to be in a couple months from now, we're gonna kind of show how to read the board,
Yeah.
but it's not as daunting as it may seem, because yes, the worker placement spots are grouped according to category. Like if you want to go to the market, you go to this area, specific area of the menu.
Yep.
And the truly the thing that you're doing in this game is you are trying to gather various sizes of polyomino tiles to place onto your main board, as well as on these separate island boards that you may or may not get throughout the game, which you should do.
You should probably
in
get
order to
those
score a lot
islands,
of points.
yes.
But you're doing this in a way that can gain you the most amount of points. And points are very hard to try to figure out where to get in this game, because you start the game off with negative points, because your entire board is just a bunch of negative points. They're going to score you negative points unless you can cover them up with these tiles.
Yeah, this is one of those games you start off with only a certain amount of workers, but as the game goes on, you start to gain more workers, meaning you can take more action. So at first you're like, I have this huge task. How the heck am I going to get anything done?
Yeah.
Obviously, if you've played the game enough, that fear of when you first like, all right, we're gonna get started,
Yeah.
goes away now
Right.
that you know how to score points. But the first 2 or 3 times you play the game, you might be like, this is way too overwhelming for
It's-
me. How
yeah.
the heck am I? How am I gonna get out of the negative just to score some points?
There's a short game and a long game, although if we can do it, we try to play the
Highly
long
recommend
game,
the long game.
every time.
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite games to introduce to new players, because a lot of times I feel like new players can get overwhelmed by it, like we were mentioning, and I really want to try to, help people through the experience and kind of like why we enjoy playing it.
It's weird. It's like heavy,
spread that love.
but not heavy at the same time. Like because it's all just kind of laid out
pretty
for
heavy.
you. It's just the decision points is what makes it heavier.
Yeah,
It's
rule
not-
set is not heavy.
Yeah.
It's not heavy rule set wise,
Yeah,
right?
once you understand the iconography, it makes sense. Like, oh, this converts into these. Get those things, and
Yeah.
like, now what do you do with those things? That's where the decision points and kind of the heaviness will come from.
Right.
There is an expansion for
Oh
this
yes,
game.
the Norwegian expansion. expansion.
The Norwegian expansion, it's fantastic. It is something that kind of changes the main board, the main menu items. For us, it's kind of a fix-it.
It's got to be, out of all the games in our collection, I think the expansion to this one is the most mandatory for us. We will try to play A Feast for Odin every single time with the Norwegian expansion.
Yeah, and it doesn't add any more overhead. It's kind of the same
It adds
game.
like a couple more things, but they really improved upon the base game with that
Yes.
expansion.
Yeah, some of the
Like,
decision
so much
points
so.
are now more balanced. Like it's like, okay, now I can maybe go with this farming strategy or with this animal strategy versus like previously you would try to do something else kind of all the time, and so now it's a little bit more of a balanced experience.
Yeah.
With this Norwegian's expansion. Yeah.
And I will say, the thing that I'm looking forward to the most about our Uwe Rosenberg series, even though it's kind of slow, is I want to see if there's another game that can kind of usurp this on our list, because we've been told by several people who have played pretty much all of Uwe Rosenberg games that there are some other ones that are coming up that are also fantastic. So that is what I'm looking forward to. Maybe in a year or so we can give an update as to where this is on our list
Yeah, that'll be
as
good.
compared to the rest of the list. But this is my number 3.
And my number 6 game of all time, A Feast for Odin. Okay, down to the last 2. Now, this is a game that is a crossover, but from a previous list that Monique talked about. So this one is the oldest on this particular list today. The original came out in 2004, and it's designed by Rudiger Dorn, published by Z-Man Games, and this game is Goa New Expedition. So this is probably one of the first heavier games in my gaming experience that I've ever played.
I think so, yeah.
The theme is very loose. You are Portuguese merchants or Portuguese traders in the Goa region of India.
Spice
You are
traders.
spice traders, exactly. You're trying to build out plantations to grow different crops, so you can essentially what you're trying to do is move down on these tech trees. The game is split up. Each round is split up into 2 halves. There's an auction phase at the very beginning, and then the second half of a round, there is a kind of multiplayer solitaire actions phase. My favorite part is the duality between the auctions phase and what you can kind of get out and eke out of that auctions phase, and then move into your multiplayer solitaire actions phase.
Action phase, yeah.
Favorite part though, ultimately, is definitely the auction. 4-player game of this is my favorite player count. Somebody has asked in a comment, I think somewhere, how does it play at 2? It plays okay at 2, but because it's an auction and there's competition for different tiles and money,
We don't do it.
Me, I would rather play something else at 2 and 3, and this is absolutely fantastic at 4. It plays in roughly 90 minutes, so it's a good amount of time. So yeah, this is a game that's going to be in our collection for a very long time. I think this is high up there when I said the game is not leaving our collection.
And this is a game that you love to run at a local convention.
Yeah, pretty
right?
much at every local convention, I try to run this game because every time I introduce it to people, they really enjoy it, and so it gave me that much joy when it was run and taught to me that I'm hoping to kind of pass that
forward.
on. Yeah, exactly, and I really enjoyed playing it too. So that is my number 2 of all time. That is Goa: A New Expedition.
All right, moving on to my number 2. This is a game that was Naveen's number 4, right? That you had to skip.
That's right.
And I do love this game so much. We've covered it on our channel before, and this is one of those that we've been promising to return back to it, but haven't had the chance. It is a game designed by Jamie Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier Games in 2016, and it is called Scythe. Although this is a legendary box, this is not the box that the original game comes in.
And it's empty.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you've revealed
I've
our
revealed. Well, you
secrets.
carried it in pretty strongly, like as if it was empty.
Oh my god, it's because we've mentioned in a previous video that we have not ported it into this box yet,
No, not
and
yet.
Embarrassingly, still hasn't happened
Still
yet.
haven't.
We will do it soon. But if you're not familiar with Scythe, this is a game about moving around this board. The theme is something like we're competing.
It's like an alternate post World War I or World War II.
Yeah, in Europe.
In Europe,
Right,
yeah.
and we're basically trying to we're going to war with
You're
each other.
competing over resources.
Yes.
You can sometimes find yourself in war.
But you're doing several things. You have this board that has 4 different sections, and those dictate the actions that you can take. It's truly action selection in that sense, because you're moving your pawn to the different sections of your board to take that action.
Similar to like Villainous, if you're familiar with moving your pawn kind of from one space to another.
Right, but the thing that's interesting is there's a top and a bottom row action. You start with the top row action, and then additionally, you can do the bottom row action if you're able to do both.
If you meet the
You
criteria.
should.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can't, and it's just a big efficiency game where you're trying to be able to take as many actions as possible by doing both of those bottom and top row actions, right?
Yeah, because like in most games, the more actions you can take, the better you're going to do.
The better
typically.
you're going to do. And it's going to be stuff like moving around the board. You're going to be growing resources according to the different hexes that you control and the different building types you put out. You're gaining popularity. There are so many different things that you can do in an effort to earn these stars. And you're going to gain stars for like reaching the highest on the popularity track or maxing out on your power.
Or winning a combat.
Right? Winning a combat gets you a star. And essentially the game ends when somebody has reached 6 stars, I believe.
It's a hard limit. It's a hard end. The second somebody gains their 6th star, the game ends. Now that does not guarantee that person is going to win the game. They might have just triggered the end game because there is a point system for scoring in this game.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. And you know what? For a very, very long time, I did not fully grasp the fact that money equals points.
Money equals points in this
game. So if you feel like you're not doing very well in this game, or maybe you're not very good at it, maybe focus on that part, because that was what really got me to click with this. Every time I would spend money to take actions, I was spending points. Or like there are certain player boards or certain parts of your player board that will gain you 3 coins every time, and you really want to hit that action when you can.
Yeah.
So just know money equals points. It's not like a fraction conversion at the end of the game. My favorite game of this is when we played a full complement of 7 players.
Yes.
And for some people who maybe this game takes a long time to play, that probably sounds like a nightmare, but it was so much fun because every single corner of the board was occupied by somebody. You can't hide, and just kind of that the drama or the politics that happens around the table is really fun as well.
Yeah, this is a fantastic game. We have played the legacy version of this, which is the Rise of Fenris.
Yeah.
We played through an entire campaign of that. It was fantastic because it's so highly rated on our top 10 list each that it just forced us to play. I think it's eight campaign games of the.
Yeah, we played
Rise of
through the
Fenris.
entire thing with the same group.
Yeah,
right?
and we played it with 5 people, and the base game of Scythe is 5 people. You have to get the invaders from afar to get to the 6th and 7th. So we played with the base 5, I believe, and it was a really, really good experience. So if you like Scythe but you haven't kind of pulled the trigger on that particular experience, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, the Rise of Fenris. And with that campaign, we were playing multiple games back to back. Another testament as to why this game is so high on my list is this is the longest game that I'm willing to play several games of in
the
one
same
sitting.
night. Yeah.
And be just as excited about the next game as I was about the first.
There's something about like coming in 2nd or 3rd in this game where you're like,
do it again.
Do it again.
Rematch.
No, you won by 4. Oh man. Okay. No,
Awful.
not this time. Yeah. And so that is my number 4 game of all time.
And my number 2, Scythe. All right, we are here at our number 1 game of all time. We finally made it. It's been a long, beautiful road, right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So
these are all great games. Again, we talked about the top 5 being a kind of a revolving door. This one is one that we never covered on the channel, surprisingly, and it's my number 1 of all time. Back in 2007, it was originally designed by Martin Wallace and now published by Roxley. This is Brass Lancashire. Specifically, I like Brass Lancashire over Birmingham. Monique covered Birmingham in a previous video.
The last slight crossover.
Crossover. For me, I personally like this one better, but they are very, very similar, and they're very, very similar in the same system. Now, I know we did read some comments in the last video when we talked about Birmingham that the photos were of Lancashire, and good for you.
You are so
You guys
good.
are very good. You are right. Detectives out there.
So we provided photos of both.
Essentially what you are different industrialists during the 1800s. You are going to be building out canals during the first half of the game to try to connect to different cities so you can build different industrial businesses or industries like coal, ironworks, different things like that. At the halfway point of the game, all the canals are going to be stripped off because now there's new technology for how you're going to ship goods through the countryside of England. And so now you're going to start to build railways to try to do the same exact thing in the second half of the game. It's very, very interesting what you're doing here. There's a hand management aspect where the cards have kind of multi-use. You can build in different industries, or you can build directly into certain cities that you're maybe cut off from. So managing your money as well as getting your income up and also putting out the right buildings in the most strategic place
is hard.
Is very hard to do. It is a very competitive game. I think it personally plays best at 3 and 4. You can now, I think back when Brass was first made, it was a 3 and 4 player only game.
Right.
Now you can play it with 2. We have played it a couple times with 2, and the sweetest experience though for me is at 3 and 4.
Yeah, so this is a re-implementation. I believe this is the original. This is based off of the original.
This is
game.
based off the original. Birmingham was kind of like a fan-generated, and then they officially made it.
Quite sure what the history of Birmingham was. All I know is it came when they did the new versions.
Yes.
These beautiful versions of this game. This is a new version of it. It is a much older title. I definitely knew that this is a game that Naveen likes way more than I do.
I knew it was going to be in the top 5 specifically. Where it was going to fall after doing the ranking, I was like finding myself just like brass. Yeah,
so, sometimes when people will gather to play this, I'll sit out and just say, you play without me because of all the mathing
There's
that
a lot
is
of math
required.
going on
It's
in this
constant
game.
math.
Min-max.
You need to math or else you're going to lose. But yeah, Naveen is like loves this game through and through.
I'm not very good at it. I don't win very often, but this is kind of like how we said inside, like I just want to play it.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to get into it and see if I can get better than the last time. Scores typically get better over time for me. I have won just a couple times, and yeah, it's just a game that I constantly want to come back to because there's just so much going on in it. That is my number 1 game of all time. I am very curious to know if anybody predicted this to be the one, but it is my number 1 game of all time. That is Brass Lancashire.
All right, and finally, my number 1 game of all time. Some people may have already guessed it because this is a game that has not appeared on my list yet.
This is my number 3, by the way.
Oh, this is your number 3?
This is my number 3. This is the last of all the crossovers
Last
here.
of the crossovers. So this is a game that was designed by Vital Lacerda, published by Eagle Gryphon Games in 2017, and it's called Lisboa.
It is known.
Not a surprise, but a truth. This is a truth in the house that we do love Lisboa. This is a game that we've covered on our channel. We talk about it a lot. It is a very different style of game for Vital Lacerda, but fantastic. So elegant in its design. You know, you if you're not familiar with the game, you have a deck of cards. You have a hand of cards. You on your turn, you play a card, and you just do a bunch of stuff.
You decide where you want to play it, and then perform actions accordingly.
Yes, that is the most simple. There's two halves to the game, and then at the end of the game, whoever has the most points wins. That's how you play Lisboa.
That's it.
It's the most simple version of it, but it is also known as one of Vital Lacerda's more complicated designs because of the everything else that happens after you play that card.
Yes, this is a very thematic game. This is centered around the
for a heavy game.
For a heavy game,
right,
this is centered around kind of the destruction of Lisbon in Portugal back in I can't remember the years. 1700s. There was a series of floods, fires, and earthquakes that occurred, and it kind of devastated the city. And it's essentially after that event happened, after that traumatic event happened, how did they rebuild Lisboa to what it is now today? And so it is a beautifully designed game. The artwork I think is personally fantastic.
Yeah.
I love the way it looks on the table. The board is really, really big, and it is such a fun experience every single time we play it.
Going back to the art, by the way, if you look really closely to the board and just the box, even you'll see like little cracks. It has kind of like that marble look to it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just such a different looking game, from other games. And this is a really good game to play at 2. This is one that
plays excellent at all player counts.
That we'll play at 2 players sometimes. But also a game that kind of fluctuates on my top 5. My true number 1 is a tie between Lisboa and Kanban. On Mars is kind of like the second, and then above them is a tie between those two.
Yeah.
And so today it was Lisboa. Tomorrow might be Kanban, but
it's been Lisboa for a while for me as my number 1 Vital game of all time.
Another game that I really, really love teaching to new players because of that difficulty and that barrier of what do I do. And it's another one of those that it seems more complicated than it really is. Right?
Yeah, this game is it's very elegant, like you said. The timing and the pacing of the game is very good. I feel like if you play with people who are well versed in the game, it can go pretty quickly. You play a card, you take the actions, and you move on. There's a point in the game where the deck of cards gets kind of changed out, and then you get kind of the same actions, but just a little bit sweeter. And so the timing of the game gets a little bit nerve-wracking. Sometimes you're like, man, I think I can do a little bit more, and then a stack runs out, and you're like, the game ends. And so I always feel like I'm 1 or 2 turns away, and I think for me that's a sign of a really, really good design. You don't want to feel like, I've done everything, and now I'm just waiting for this clock to run out.
This is a game that we've talked about so much in the past, and so we'll leave it at that. This is my number 1 and
my number 3 of all time. That is Lisboa.
And there you have it. That is the end of our top 50 board games of all time. Now, we haven't forgotten about the giveaway. And in the past, our giveaway has had to do with one of our number one games from the list. But since we've already given away a copy of Lisboa,
Yeah, that's right.
we are partnering today with Stonemaier Games. So thank you so much to Jamie and everybody over at Stonemaier Games for sponsoring the giveaway for this video. All the details are in the description, but basically we are giving away any 3 Scythe-related products from the Stonemaier Games web store.
And that includes the base game of Scythe.
Yes, that includes the base game or expansions, whatever you're missing or whatever you're interested in getting. Thank you again to Stonemaier Games and to everybody who has been just following along on our journey so far. Anybody who's participated in the giveaways as well. We've been enjoying reading your responses, although I think we might have doubled up on some questions now. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. So I have not been responding to a lot of comments right now. It is during the holidays, but I am absolutely reading all the comments, and I'm really, really enjoying reading through everybody's lists. So please continue to let us know what your 10 to 1 is, because it's really exciting, and it's also a fantastic resource for anybody who's just found these videos. Maybe they're just new to the hobby and they just want resources as to what games are out there that I should be investigating. Those lists in the comments are really, really helpful.
So again, thank you so much for following on our journey. We really appreciate everybody who supported us so far. All the details in the giveaway are in the description below. We hope you all have a wonderful new year, and we will be back with our regularly scheduled playthroughs very soon. Thanks again.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Bye.